Hey, what is going on, everybody? It is Aaron Trevino, and we have a terrific guest today. We have Thomas Hopes from here in Austin, Texas. He is a Central Texas realtor, and he is also the podcast host of the Inquiring Mind. What's going on, Thomas?
How you doing, Aaron?
Man, good to have you.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation, man. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. No, we had this in the works for a couple of weeks. We've been talking on and off, and yeah, it's great to make it happen.
Yeah, it's a bit of interesting thing to transition into the virtual world to basically utilize the video calling a lot more often now than just meeting up with people.
Yeah,
I'm,
yeah.
I'm kind of adjusting to it still. I'm a little
Okay.
old-fashioned.
So you're more of an in-person guy. You like the handshake. You like the.
Yeah, I'd even give you a hug, man, the first day I met you.
Okay, we can all need a hug every now and then, so I
Yeah.
I, I get you. Cool,
Outside of
Tom.
the social distancing, of
Yeah,
course.
of course, a hug from 6 feet away. But
Yeah, yeah.
no, yeah, Thomas. So for people who are watching aren't familiar with you, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a Central Texas realtor here in the Austin area and investor as well. I primarily focus on assisting brand new investors or also first-time home buyers as well. I like to focus on those two markets in particular because at some point in my recent past, I started to see the spike in interest of people that are in my network that want to get into real estate investing and want to get into real estate, but just not sure where. And so I just decided to take my experience and my knowledge and the history of the different businesses that I've worked in and just started to apply that, which was basically customer service. My customer service skills with now my real estate knowledge, and also started like kind of like a hand holding, if you will, into real estate. And so what I like to do is just focus on first time home buyers and first time investors. That's a great market for me. And I also myself run a podcast here in Austin. It's called the Inquiring Mind. And on the Inquiring Mind, what we do is we talk about real estate, relationships, health, history, and entertainment. And we like to discuss problems and solutions on there and invite different guests or sometimes have some controversial discussions that aren't just always talked about.
Okay, understood. So I'm just curious that those people that were kind of in your network, they're your friends, maybe your family, they don't know where to start with real estate. How do you kind of transition them into that? What do you suggest they do to kind of get a little more knowledge about how things work in the industry?
For me, everything is built on information. I'm big on structure and foundation, and I believe every solid business and relationship needs information to actually help it sustain for the long run. And so what I like to do with my friends, family, or clients is first, I like to ask them a bunch of questions about what they actually know that they want to do. And then I like to ask them what they want to do. And then I like to see where I can add value to that. So primarily it's just feeding them information so we can build a foundation first. Because a lot of people, this is such a broad industry, as you know yourself, that you could end up anywhere if you allow yourself to drift.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of goes with anything, it's
Yes,
information is kind of information can be your best friend and your worst enemy. Too much of it, you get overwhelmed. Just the right amount, you can act.
absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what are you doing right now with these first time home buyers? What part of town are you kind of looking at? What's your process like with them?
So what I actually like to do is I primarily work with buyers around the 250, 300 mark. And we are typically shopping in the outskirts of Austin. So you may see Leander on that list. You may see Cedar Park, Hutto, Manor, Round Rock, Pflugerville. Those are the main places that I'm pretty much doing business at for my network of clients that are first time buyers. I also am certified with TSAC, Texas State Affordable Corporation. And what they assist with is basically providing first-time buyers with down payment assistance, primarily for your veterans, police officers, teachers, nurses. Those are that are in those professional roles in the front line. And so I actually like to market and promote that as much as I can, because many people don't already know they work in a profession that actually makes them eligible for some down payment assistance. So I like to focus on those areas for first time home buyers in those outskirts.
Okay, absolutely. So what specific outskirts could you name a few?
Sure. And so like right outside of North Austin, my favorite places are going to be Leander, Cedar Park, Hutto and Round Rock and Pflugerville. Those are, I probably had my last 3 deals closed in within those areas, and probably have a few more deals coming up here soon, just going into those areas. And the reason be is just that Austin is growing and expanding so much, and the cost of living hasn't, the pay in the city hasn't gone up as much. So you see just a lot of things echo as you do in other major cities like San Francisco, LA, or New York, or Miami, where people actually start to flutter into the suburbs, driving to their jobs about 30 minutes, 45 minutes away, just so they could have that affordable living. And so I try to make that as accommodating as possible, because we all know sometimes it's not it doesn't feel the greatest to live far from work. But at the same time, it does feel great to be able to afford somewhere where you enjoy coming home every day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's kind of astounding, even if you think about people who are willing to drive south, all the way from Killeen.
Yes.
They'll live in Killeen, they'll commute down to North Austin and go back home. But I mean, people
Yes.
are willing to do that too.
Yeah, and it's just having that determination. In this business, you have to choose to make a step. Real estate doesn't just happen for anyone. That's on the agent side or business side, and that's also on the client side. You have to decide and dedicate yourself to making that transition into home ownership. And sometimes you have to make that risk, that sacrifice to drive that extra 10, 20, 30 minutes if home ownership is truly what you want. And
Absolutely.
and when you're right with the right agents, they make that clear for you how it's still a benefit. And so that's what I do my best to try to provide.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, aside from owning your own place, what would kind of be some main points you would say that, having your own home would be better than just renting for a while?
I say anybody who's planning to live somewhere long term, consider home ownership, because number one, you get to enjoy the benefits of a property that's continuing to appraise. And so an asset that's building. And so for those who don't know what a property that's continuing to appraise or asset that's building, what that is, that's basically if you're buying this home, every year it's going up in value. And so as this home is going up in value and you're paying down your mortgage, you're actually creating more equity in your home or more value in your home. So when you get ready to sell that home, you have more value or more equity to take out of it than when you first got in it. And so I think that's one of the hugest benefits, that when you move out of this home and you get ready to sell it or rent it out, you get some sort of monetary return, which is the complete opposite of renting a home, because with that, you basically pay the landlord to get a return on their money, is the only way I see it. And so I think that's the hugest thing. The next big thing, I would say, you get to lock in rates. I mean, if you're going to be somewhere 5, 10, 15 years, and you have a fixed mortgage rate, your mortgage payment is never going up unless you decide to refinance or something. But you lock in a rate every single month, every single year that's not changing. And so when you compare that to rent and how you can almost count on rent to go up every single year, you start to see how much money is actually being, I mean, when you're a homeowner, you see it being thrown away if you think about rent. But when you're a renter in a renter's mind state, sometimes you're just thinking, hey, I have a place to stay, which is quite all right. But that's a part of the information and education that I like to share about transitioning into home ownership, because you almost have another bill you're giving yourself if you own a home, you know, or not, I shouldn't say a bill, another credit, not a bill, another credit.
Yeah, no, that's a very good way to look at it. Bill as opposed to credit. Could you kind of elaborate on that little distinction between bill and credit?
Yeah, so for rent, you know, I know, let's say for example, rent's due first of the month every month, $1,000. That is a bill that I have every month that when I pay it, I'm not getting anything back from it except the roof that's already over my head. And so I say home ownership is like a credit, and paying a mortgage is like a credit, because it's essentially a savings account. You know, you pay the bank or the mortgage broker $1,000 a month for your mortgage, and this $1,000 a month is going to your principal and your interest, which is helping you pay down your loan, and go to the equity that we were discussing here recently that eventually helps build up the value not only of your house, but now that you own this home or are buying this home, you actually are considered an asset holder at this point. So now you're not just someone with a $200,000 house, you're someone who's worth $200,000 now. And I think that's a huge thing with the credit and versus it being rental and it being a bill.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I could cut out that little just 1 minute explanation you gave and just put it everywhere that I could. Why? You know what I mean? Why do most people not know this? What you just explained over the past, minute, why do most people not have that perspective? Why can't people explain things like that?
You know what? I used to say that would be difficult to answer, but I see for myself, it's loud and clear. The more and more I learn, the more and more I educate myself, the more and more I inform myself, and the more I ask questions. It's education. It's education and wisdom. And many people simply don't have the education, therefore they don't have the knowledge, which leads to them not being able to apply that in a way that's wise for them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's great that you're being able to kind of educate your clients, the client base that you have, and basically showing them how they can put their money to work for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the biggest thing in this capitalistic society is making your money work for you. And some of us operate in opposition to that.
Yeah. Yep. That definitely tends to happen. But I'm just interested in more so. I can see a lot's going on in your mind. You've got a great mindset. How do you get your mind right? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you read books? What do you do?
So, Aaron, I try to do a little bit of everything that my heart and my spirit takes me to, but I delve into psychology books. I love psychology. I love behavioral psychology. I enjoy neuroscience. So I enjoy everything about the mind and everything that it has to offer and not offer and create, even if it's an illusion at times. So I love everything about the mind. And on top of that, I'm pretty absorbed in a lot of podcasts. One of my favorite, I would say, is probably a popular one, Joe Rogan. I just love the content that he brings and the wide range of conversations that he's able to have and take it from the industry that he's in, which is multiple industries that he's in. But I really enjoy having a conversation that we're able to take on a spectrum. And so
Sure.
I would say Joe Rogan podcast, reading self-help psychology books, outdoors activities for sure, like rollerblading, bike riding. Anytime I can get next to some water. And when I was able to, a little dancing, almost too much.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. Now, one thing you said that was really interesting was talking about an illusion, maybe someone believing something that something that isn't exactly there. Could you kind of elaborate on what you meant by illusion?
Yeah, I mean, I'll even use just the comparison of a homeowner that's paying $1,000 versus a renter that's paying $1,000. I mean, they're both they both have the perception that they're doing what they need to do, and that renter has, because of the lack of knowledge that they have, or it's not always lack of knowledge, because the choice that they want and the freedom that they may want, they may choose not to pay themselves in a mortgage or pay themselves like a credit. They may like the freedom of getting up and moving every year or living month to month. But because that perception, it doesn't quite help them financially. And that's why I say it's a bit of an illusion, because many of us just, as long as we can convince ourselves we're putting a roof over our head, we probably feel like we're doing the best we can do with our lives. And to me, when you've seen your lowest self and you've risen to great heights, you now see how your lowest self operates. And so you almost know when you are putting yourself in a position that's not the best position for you. And it's up to your highest self, or what I like to say, your God consciousness, to guide you out of it, or else you'll fall susceptible or victim to a decision that you don't want to make, or you end up in the same circle that you've been complaining about over and over again.
Absolutely. So, could you kind of elaborate a bit more on that, kind of that difference between your lowest and highest self?
Um, yeah. So, for example, before I even got into real estate, I had absolutely no knowledge of what an asset was, or I had absolutely no knowledge of where your money goes after you pay your mortgage. I didn't know how that differed from paying rent. And so my lower self, my less educated self was comfortable with just paying rent and just providing a roof over my head, which is okay, because where I was in my time is what I was able to do at the time. Because ultimately, you can only think and operate in what you know. And so when you can only think and operate in what you know, don't beat yourself up. Don't beat yourself up. So your lowest self, I would say, is really quick to beat yourself up when you don't know something. But your highest self, your higher self, your God conscious, the one that is a lot more aware or curious to understand and know, this part of yourself is constantly working towards growth within you. And it doesn't make any room for less than growth. Just like the lower self doesn't make room for growth, but your higher self doesn't make anything less than room for growth. And so when I started to get curious about knowing things would start to flow towards me, things I wanted to know. So when I started to want to know about real estate investing and why it was so important and what pennies on the dollars were, because I kept seeing all these infomercials and a salesman on this corner and a salesman on this YouTube channel. And eventually, when you ask enough questions and you're focused enough, you get people around you that provide you with what you're looking for. Now, your lower self never leaves you, so you always have to be mindful of the illusion of how you want to operate with this new opportunity, because your lower self is making you comfortable with comfortability, which is typically not going to want you to learn something new or grow. But your higher self is constantly telling you, right on the other side of this is something you really want. And so I had to start getting really comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I hate being uncomfortable because I like to know it all. And so my real estate journey has actually been more humbling than anything, because I was a little, I wouldn't say I was a know-it-all, because I wasn't like smarter than anybody else, but it was a arrogance in thinking you know what you think you know about the world. And eventually when you're humbled enough, you see that you don't know anything. And I like being on the spectrum of not knowing anything so I can continue to humble myself to learn from more and more people. And I think that has been the sole thing that's allowed me to open up the doors to now distinguish real estate investing and having an asset is always going to be better than renting a home or renting an apartment and having a liability that's constantly have you wasting money while the other has you constantly making money. And so for anybody who has the understanding or knowledge, they'll see that opportunity and run with it. But for those of us under our own illusions, well, we may argue to death to
it. No, it's one neat thing that you said there was you'd kind of talked about how the world kind of opens up to you in a sense. You kind of take that step, you start learning a bit more, kind of how you talked about, okay, what does pennies on the dollar mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you just kind of step one little toe in, and before you know it, you're in there.
Exactly, because when I was starting in real estate, or before I got into real estate, I used to see these, infomercials about pennies on the dollars. Just buy homes, pennies on the dollars. And I'm just like, what the hell is pennies on the dollars mean? Like in your head, you're thinking people are really buying real estate for pennies, and it's just the lack of knowledge really computing through your head. So you get really anxious, excited. You may go watch some videos. You may stay up late and watch infomercials. But eventually I learned that was simply tax foreclosures, tax deed sales. But something about language that creates a blinder. And there's a reason certain people go to public school, certain people go to private school, certain people have businesses, and certain people only know to be employees. Back to that education.
Yep, that's right. You brought up a really interesting point about language too. Could you kind of elaborate a bit more on that?
What you want to know more about it?
Yeah, no, you had just mentioned how, language would kind of determine different things, right?
Yeah, so at one point in time in my journey, I started to just study the dictionary and just study words. And I came to recognize that I used words almost every day that I didn't know the definition to. And I was like, how many people in the world use words every day that they don't know the definition to? And so when you started to look at the definition of the words, some of the words you use, they have so many different synonyms or so many ways they can be used. I started to recognize, am I using words in the correct context, or in the right format? And that became an addiction for me. And after I watched myself use words in a way that I didn't really like, I started to monitor myself more. And I came across this book. It was called The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. And one of his agreements was be impeccable with your word. And I was like, wow, what does that mean? And it's like, do what you say, mean what you say. I was like, wow, some people, they'll joke here, they'll kid here, they'll tell a little white lie here, they'll lie here. But when it came to speaking things in existence, he was like, when you do what you say and you mean what you say, and you add it with those other agreements, it creates wonders for you. And so when I know the language and I know what I'm saying, my manifestation became much easier. But what I often see is people who don't understand certain language. I like to use music as an example all the time. See, because music, it has a certain harmony, certain vibration, and it's making you vibe with it, which is a beautiful thing. And when you start hearing the songs or reciting the songs, well, some people will recite language and lyrics that sound great on the music, but it actually contradicts with their spirit and their lifestyle. Mm. And so after hearing these songs so many times, they'll actually start to behave or act out in ways that the music almost has programmed, but it's in contradiction to who they feel like as a person. That's how you could easily see people who can go to their jobs and do everything their boss says, but they come home and they have no skills with their partners. And it's almost like they allow media to dictate what they do socially, but as long as they're getting money or going to their jobs, it's okay to block that out. And so I like to use music because the language in a lot of music tells me a lot. It told me a lot about myself. It told me a lot about myself and why I like certain songs, because I love hip hop music. I love rap music. I love, energetic music. But I also seen where I wasn't shooting up guns in the club. I'm not popping bottles. I'm not throwing stacks of money on women and calling them B words at the same time. And so I started to see how that was a contradiction to who I was. Doesn't mean I stopped listening to it, but I started to be more mindful of what I was actually speaking around me. And so I started to just be more mindful of the language that I would use. And then it started to open up to me that, wow, so many people use language every day, but sometimes they don't really mean what they say. I think that's what I'm ultimately trying to say. Many people don't mean what they say.
Yep, that can definitely
I'm
happen.
sorry I ramble. Sometimes you got to cut me off.
No, that was great, man. So what do you think causes this incongruence? Maybe someone saying they'll do something, they don't do it. Maybe someone is an old soul who, deep down is kind of living in decades past, in their spirit, but yet they need to get pumped up at the gym and they listen to really loud rock music, right? So
Yeah.
what do you think causes this kind of incongruence with people?
I just think it's critical thinking, because again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with listening to music or, music that's not like your spirit. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. What happens though is with language I love that one of my favorite podcasts is by Zoe Williams, and they talk about how words are spells. That's why we call it spelling. They're spells. So when you speak certain words, you're actually creating spells right before your very eyes, before your very ears, before your friends and family's very eyes and very ears. And so after they latch on to these words that you've shared, they then create bindings within each one of us. So if I said I love you, you heard I love you, and so that's going to create some sort of binding within you. And so when I started to look at these words, I started to add the words to the behaviors and see if the words match the energy. And oftentimes, if a word like love doesn't have action behind it, you can tell that it doesn't match the energy, and therefore they don't mean what they say. They're just using a word that they know to use. And I love to talk about love because that's one thing I struggle with. That's one of my reasons that's inspired my podcast.
I think everyone struggles, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah. But the language, it's when I didn't know what a word meant, I didn't know how it was affecting me. Now that I know how certain words affect me and how I use certain words to affect others and cast spells on others and them with me as well, I'm more aware. My eye is more open, so I'm a big person who likes to focus on not what people are telling you, but what people are not saying. That's what I think about now. And that's what I focus on now. And it's helped me harness my own higher self, I would say.
Okay. Can you kind of explain what you mean by, what people are saying versus not saying? What if someone were to suggest, okay, I'm maybe slightly introverted. Maybe I'm not a big verbal guy, but heck, I can do math. I have great analytical skills. How would you kind of explain that difference?
I wouldn't quite say it's much of a a difference for someone that's an introvert or something like that, I would say it's more so just, I would say strictly the language that they're using with themselves and
Mm.
other people, you know. So not as much as if you're an introvert or extrovert, but more so is when you as an individual get around others, if you know that you don't do the dishes after you cook, why try to impress a lady that you do the dishes after you cook?
Mm.
Because you know that will sway her, even though you know you told yourself a lie, you know?
Sure,
And
sure.
and so it's what I started to see with my, after analyzing myself, is that how easy it was to lie to myself. That way I could get other people to believe.
Mm.
And when I started to see how much I was conflicted within myself, it made me curious how conflicted other people were within themselves as well. Because at some point in time, when social media first dropped, I wanted to maintain this image that I really wasn't. And what happened? Because I didn't have the same energy to match it, I wasn't that. Disappeared. I
Yeah.
disappeared. And it was for good reason. It was because some people can fake it to make it, but Thomas Hopes, he's not a fake it to make it guy. Faking it to make it took me away from who I was. And before you know it, I was so far gone that I didn't know who I was. And so I had to go on my own personal journey to start connecting back to myself and stop faking it to make it, because faking it consists of me lying to myself, therefore lying to others.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem too, is that a lot of times, maybe you try to tell yourself, you're going to fake it till you make it. And if anything, you're kind of being disingenuous, not only to yourself, but also to other people.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, you're probably confusing yourself the most, because your identity is wrapped up in something that frankly doesn't even exist, because you're just playing a part, right?
right. Absolutely that. Absolutely that. And when you start to think you're the part that you're playing, that's when you know you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Because you might turn around and you might be like, I like this. I like playing this part. I like playing this character in this movie. But you realize you're not the character in the movie. That's why I like the show Power, if you ever got into it. And you know, the gentleman who plays the main character Ghost in it, um, uh, Amari Amari Hardwick, he talks about how people still call him Ghost outside in his everyday life, and he doesn't like it because he understands he's not his character. But many people, they don't want to disassociate that and detach that character from him. And so I see how character has so much influence on not only us as individuals, but the people that are looking at us constantly.
Yeah. Could you kind of describe a bit more about character?
Yeah, I mean, the, you know, growing up, we are constantly shaping and molding ourselves from our parents' ideas, our friends and families' ideas, our teachers' ideas, and TV, now social media, radio. And so you have all of these different influences from different characters, and you haven't even built your character. So now you go years and years through your life not having a character, just taking from other people's character until you create something. Now, I'm not going to call it character. I'm actually going to call it ego. And the reason I want to call it ego is because this is what you've built to make you feel like somebody. Now, not necessarily say you may not be some of these things that you've collected, but more so to say you will eventually see that you are not your friends' ideas, your family's ideas, your teacher's ideas, your parents' ideas. You'll eventually see that you are your own being. And a lot of these characters you took to build your ego was actually something that was destructive to you as a person growing as an individual. And so you'll actually go through a phase where you rebuild your very own character because it's built out of ego or out of other people's identities.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're kind of, I guess as you grow up, you're kind of, things are put on you, maybe a way of belief, a way of thinking, a way of acting, your overall character. And then kind of as you go along, you kind of decide what you need to keep and what you need to kind of discard, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not all of it's bad, not all of it's good. And so you're gonna take some things, you're gonna leave some things, but you're also gonna find some things within your very own character that you didn't expect. And oftentimes you're gonna find things in your very own character that were in uncomfortable places. As I'm such a big proponent on people analyzing their pain more than avoiding it, because the more you avoid it, your character's pain, you run straight to it. And so I'm a big proponent on people studying their pain that their character is going through, because your character may be trying to change roles. Your character may be trying to change mindsets. And sometimes we do that thing that Einstein says, and we try the same thing over and over, expecting different results.
Yeah,
So you
absolutely.
have to let that character go through those painful moments.
That's right. That's right. It almost sounds like you kind of a journey to kind of, I guess, being fully grounded and kind of comfortable with, who you are and where you're going, what you're doing, and kind of, putting aside whatever won't serve you and serve the people around you.
Absolutely, Aaron. Absolutely, man. That's exactly what I think, that your character, that's your higher self, is trying to tell you, like, I just want to see you at your best. But we all have our lazier side that just says, man, I just want to have fun. I just want to chill and relax. And this is my best. And so you have a responsibility as the entity in between those two extremities to choose which one you're going to be with every choice and with every day.
Yeah. A lot of times you don't really know what you're made of until, circumstances call for it. You don't really know what you're made of till your back's against the wall. You don't really know what you're made of until there's a crisis, whether it be, in your family, whether it's economic, whether it's
Yes,
whatever it may be. So it's almost like you'll never see those little parts of what could be unless, you're kind of forced to see that through circumstance.
absolutely. Absolutely. And those are the circumstances that you just described, that your true character reveals itself. Your true character. And I like that you brought that up, because many people, they discover those layers of I'm not going to finish that, because I'm going to actually say this. I used to always wonder why every successful person had this story about homelessness or being in poverty or living out of their car, some kind of heartfelt like story. And now I'm like, wow, it's exactly what you're saying. People don't see their greatness until they've seen their worst. When you see and many people, after they see their worst, many people can't confront it. But there are a few of us that we see our worst and we create the exact opposite of our worst. And we pull ourselves out of that situation and many other situations. And it tends to echo and shine light into other people's lives for those few people that choose to do that.
So you made an interesting kind of comparison there between those two different types of people. Those types of people who will, confront a situation, they can't really handle it, and they just fold. And then you kind of have that other more, I guess, elite group of people who don't give up, and they eventually, that it was maybe that guy who was homeless, that guy who made it to the top, or whatever it may be. What do you think the difference is between the people that fold and the people that kind of persevere?
Bolen, one of my favorite authors, she wrote this book called Goddess in Every Woman. And if you're familiar with the Greek goddesses like Artemis, for example, she was a Greek goddess who was the greatest competitor. And she was so great at her competition that she could basically beat people. Let's just say she could beat people with her eyes closed. And so she had a certain ambition that other competitors just didn't have when she seen a goal in mind. And she was so focused on getting to this goal that one day she was challenged by someone to shoot something in a long range. And the long range, she couldn't see at the end of the distance, but she thought she could still hit the target. Well, she definitely hit the target, but after she got closer to her target and found out the target that she hit, she realized that it was her love interest. And so this other entity had basically used her own ambition and greed against her to basically destroy her love interest because of her own ambition. Tells her to always go for her target, always get what you want, no matter what, remove all boundaries. And so I say that to say some people don't let anything like destruction get in their way. They remove the boundaries of destruction and they rebuild themselves out of the ashes and they become the phoenix.
It really is a beautiful thing to watch, because I mean, if there's one thing America loves, we love the comeback kid, no matter what.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
We do. It's the hero's story, the hero's journey, man. We love it.
Joseph Campbell.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I think it was Star Wars was written based off the hero's journey, wasn't it?
Yes, a lot of inspiration from the hero's journey, and a lot of inspiration just from ancient antiquity or ancient African stories is in that. Even the hero's journey is the same story told over and over in many different ways. It's beautiful, really.
Yeah, I sure do love it. If you could kind of break it down a little bit, what's the hero's journey for you?
For me personally, or just like a movie or a TV show or something.
I mean, just could you kind of explain what the hero's journey is?
The hero's journey is, a man or woman is going through life. They have some tragedy happen to them that appears it's going to be their downfall and their breaking point. And right when you think their downfall or their breaking point is about to, sweep them off their feet, they're actually presented with an opportunity to become a hero. And oftentimes, people like the Avengers, they step up to that plate and they take on that hero mantle. So that hero's journey is told many times over and over again with different stories like Hercules and Achilles, and we could just go on and on with these many different stories. The Christ, Buddha. This hero's journey is forever. It's written in many different ways. Today we might see it, like I said, in the Avengers or in superhero movies.
Yeah, it's as old as time. I mean, you have one man or woman. They're in a spot. They're faced with some sort of situation or circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
They're at home. They're called to be away from the home. Do they respond to the call or not?
Right.
If they do, when they respond to their call to action, their call to adventure, they get there. They're put through tests, different adventures. They fight battles, and
they wield dragons.
And dragons, that too.
Slay dragons, talk to dragons.
You can't forget about those dragons, man.
No, man.
Absolutely. No, that was yeah, I mean, it sounds like you like mythology as well a bit.
I do. I love mythology, man. I love just because everything is really a symbol of something else. And mythology, it makes it really animated. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually posted something on Facebook today. It was something that kind of was listening to my little audiobook this morning at the gym, and something kind of spoke to me. And I'll mess up the quote, but it was something along the lines of the same sun that you look at is the same sun that your ancestors, the people before you, saw. So
Yeah,
the quote was suggesting that you know it's good to call into question what really is old school.
man.
It's
Yeah,
it's easy to
if we're
disregard.
dealing with the same sun.
Yeah, it's easy for a 21-year-old to come in and think they know everything, but a lot of times it almost seems like what we're lacking, at least in Western culture, is kind of just kind of that elder wisdom, you know.
I like that. And with the mythology, they take wisdom from people from all ages and from all backgrounds, and they they transform it into something that's actionable for you. And that's why I like a lot of the stories about the Greek gods that they present to us, because it gives you a chance to you think of something that's greater than you, but you also get to witness it being similar to you. And although it might not be you and it might be greater than you, it's that relativity that's there. And I liked having that relativity with mythology and with with just any kind of history like that symbolizes something else.
It is kind of neat how you can kind of step into their shoes and kind of see those little parallels, those little similarities.
Yeah. I always bring up this author, Jean Bolen. I keep bringing her up because she just introduced me to a way, instead of thinking of Greek gods as something that's outside of me. The way she did her writing was, as a psychologist, she said, imagine these Greek gods and goddesses as archetypes within us, as attitudes, as behaviors within us, as emotions within us, and emotional responses within us. And when I started to see a character like Zeus, who's mentally astute, but he's emotionally distant, I see how men out here who can play football and be so into sports, but have no way to connect with their women. It's like things start to ring true.
Yep, that's definitely true. Yeah, it's kind of again talking about the incongruence. Maybe you can get it done on the field, but your relationships at home are lacking.
Yeah, yeah, and it's always something to work on. I say I have been what I've had to shine the light on here recently is I got so wrapped up in work that I I fell victim to that myself. I'm not necessarily a sports star, but I'd start making more money than I did ever in my business and neglected my relationship. And so that's a perfect example of just being in my mind so much and thinking about building this and doing this, to where I was emotionally distant and disconnected. So almost acting out that Zeus patriarchy, or Zeus ideology, should I say.
Absolutely. So I guess kind of off that, how do you kind of come back and reset yourself into what where you want to go to get you on that path?
I actually had to humble myself, and sometimes we get so wrapped up in our minds that we don't give ourselves what we really want. And so I hadn't taken a trip out of the state in nearly, what, 3 or 4 years now. And so I had to schedule a couple trips. I have a couple trips set up for next month and October. I went horseback riding a couple months for the first time. I've been procrastinating about it for the last few years, and I just went ahead and finally did it. And I finally went ahead and launched that podcast I've been procrastinating about. And so I had to basically connect some lies to myself, and I had to stop lying to myself, and I had to actually, to bring it back full circle, I had to stop lying to myself. I had to give myself what I really wanted.
So what exactly was the lie? Just that you were in this direction, but you should have been somewhere else, or what do you think?
Sure, yeah, just elaborate. The lie was, I was so wrapped up in growing my business that I didn't have time to love myself and take care of myself. And now that I'm forced to love myself and take care of myself, I have plenty of time to do it.
Yeah.
So the lie is, You always have time to love yourself. Don't ever tell yourself you don't have time for that.
I
Health is
like that.
wealth.
I'll remember that. I'll remember that.
Yes.
Well, very good, man. I mean, it's been great chatting about this. Is there anything that you'd really like to just hammer home to anyone who's watching?
Man, you know what? It's hard for me to say. You asked some great questions. I love your style of your questions, your poise, and the way we were able to just flow back and forth, brother. So you really helped me say a lot of things that I love to share, man. I would mostly say take from this, don't lie to yourself. And when you're in pain, no matter what kind of pain that is, don't avoid it, but specifically observe it and make sure that you're not actually about to run from opportunity.
That's crucial, man.
I will leave it on that. I'll leave it on that note.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, Thomas. Well, you've been a terrific guest. Where can we find you?
You can find me on Facebook. My full name is Thomas Hopes. You could also find my company's name, Thomas Hopes Investment Solutions, on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram under Mr. T Hopes. That's MRTHOPES. And check me out on my podcast, The Inquiring Mind. It's currently on Spotify and Anchor, and I believe Google Podcasts. I'm working on Apple Podcasts at the moment.
Yes, sir. There will be a link in the description.
Awesome. Man, thank you so much for the opportunity, man. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to switch seats with you. I hope I do as good a job that you did. I'm really humbled and honored.
Hey, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. You definitely stretched my mind a little bit, and man, I'm gonna have to do a lot more reading now.
Man, hey, I actually want to know what book you were reading the other day that you said you were reading in the gym.
That was the Richest Man in Babylon.
Okay, you know what?
Yep.
Procrastinating is sitting right over there, and I haven't read it. So I need to do some reading just like you, man. I got an assignment too.
We'll have to swap. I'll do my homework, you'll do yours, and then we'll be back on another podcast.
When I follow back up with you, yeah, I'll make sure you've read a little something. That way I can share with you that I've read a little bit of The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yes, sir. That's right. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Thomas.
Hey, thank you again, Aaron.
Take care.
Have a great one.